Welcome. Thank you for joining us at Empowering Creatives to Live Their Dreams. I'm Jessica Osrak. Today we have a film director and producer who is the co-founder and CEO of Design in DC, Ziad Foty. Welcome, Ziad.
Hi, Jessica.
Hello. So I'd love to know what first inspired you to pursue a career in film. And how did you find your path as a director, producer, and professor?
Yes, thanks for that question. So I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I always had an interest in filmmaking from a young age. My mother was an artist, always a painter, always pushing us to kind of go to the museum. So, I was just very interested in art in general. It wasn't really until I took a film class in high school where we got to study the history of cinema from silent films of Keaton to Citizen Kane, Metropolis, Paleo-realism, that I really started to take a deep interest, not just in the history of cinema, but
Mhm.
also in the making, because in that class we were pushed to make our own film. I did my film. The name of my film was called Black and White Keys, and it was about an African American kid who falls victim to the kind of drugs and selling drugs and gets put in jail, and in jail learns to kind of cope with his trauma by playing the piano, an imaginary piano. And so that film won all the awards at our local film festival, including Best Director, Best Film, and Best Actor, and that experience really made me interested in wanting to pursue filmmaking. I always believed as a young kid that to impact the world in a positive way, that I actually really thought deeply about becoming a politician, and I decided to go into filmmaking because I felt like I could impact more people's hearts and minds in a faster fashion than being a politician. So I always like to look at filmmaking as a more effective politician in a way, because it can really lead to true and lasting change. So from there, I did my undergrad degree in English literature at Lafayette College. I was on the Posse Scholarship. I don't know if you're aware, it's a leadership scholarship. I was always making films there as well, but also really pursued the study of cinema, to where I did my master's of philosophy at Trinity College Dublin in Ireland, and I wrote my dissertation on Bolt of the Sea, which is a Palestinian American film. And I just talked in general about the new trend of Palestinian American women filmmakers that were dominating these kind of large festivals like Cannes and Sundance, and changing the age-old narrative of Arab stereotypes. From there, I did my master's, another MFA at Howard University, and made my own films there, really pursued production much more than the theory and history. And then I naturally from there jumped into teaching, because I was always interested in teaching the new generations. I taught at Howard, Catholic University, George Mason. I'm just a student of life. So filmmaking was always about learning on the job, and I learned from my students as much as they learned from me as well. So that was a very impactful experience. I taught for about 5 years.
It's nice to give back. And it's true, as you're teaching, you do learn as well.
Right.
So, as a professor, what did you hope to instill in your film students? And what do you believe is the most important lesson they need to learn to succeed in the industry?
Yes, great question. At the end of the day, talent, it matters to a degree, right? The thing to me that is the most important for students is having consistency. The students that I've seen go the furthest in the industry are ones that have this undying commitment and work ethic. So like I've seen some people that are extremely talented and have all the raw skills, all the raw gifts, but don't put in the work. And those people ultimately don't succeed no matter how talented they are. Also, I've seen people that are not very talented in a raw way, but really hone their skills and constantly are finding ways to improve themselves, and they always do well, even if they're not that talented. And then finally, the people that have that raw skill and are also very goal oriented and go getters, they usually reach like the highest heights that I've seen because when you combine those two skill sets, there's really nothing that can bring you down.
I love that. So you are currently both a filmmaker and a small business owner. So how
Yes.
do you balance your creative projects with the demands of entrepreneurship, and what have been the rewards?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, it's a challenge. I'm not going to say that I walked in knowing exactly how to balance those two worlds. For me, I always had a dream of having a company that would be able to kind of run itself, and also that I would be able to be a working filmmaker and still work on all my creative passions. And to me, both of those were important because often we find artists kind of falling victim to this idea of, oh, well, I got to make money. So they kind of just put their artistic passions on hold. It was really important that design in DC was the avenue that I was going to provide a living for myself and also employment for all sorts of other creatives looking to have flexible work environment. And like I like to run design in DC much like I would run a film production company where creative ideas are welcomed and we like to think of ourselves as a family. But as I mentioned, also balancing the creative side of things. For me, I always had to set some part of the day towards my creative projects and block my calendar off. So right now I'm working on my first feature documentary, The Stripe in Her Eye, and it's taken a long time. I had started it all the way back from when I was in grad school at Howard University. And the one thing I knew is just that I wanted this film to be something special and also knowing when to say that's enough. And there's a very personal story about my dad and my sister. It's actually told through the eyes of my sister, and my dad being exiled from Ramallah, Palestine, and just the the journey of the second generation Palestinian American that is living in America in the belly of the beast, where the American dollars are going to fund the constant genocide and exile of our people. So it's told from that perspective through my sister's eyes, watching my father and all the things that he has to contend with in terms of memory, and then what happens when we actually go back. So we go back to Ramallah, Palestine, happened almost 10 years ago now. I can't believe it. But
Okay.
in saying that the film has really evolved to, all the rookie kind of mistakes that I made in the beginning, I've brought on professionals that have elevated me. So, Dina Imam, award-winning producer, her film went to the Oscars. It went to also, won at Cannes. I always had this rule of surrounding myself with people that were better than me, especially as my work was being dominated mainly by design in DC. But again, the balance comes to having time for your creative projects and carving out that time. I'm actually just finishing reading this book, Atomic Habits, which
Mm.
just shows how habits are created. And it's not about the lightning in the bottle idea, but it's about consistency. So if you set aside that time and you stick to that time every day, then you ultimately will achieve your goals.
That's a great book. It's one of my favorites
Yeah,
too. And it sounds
right.
like you're taking some key points from that book and applying it to your life. And that's key to become a
hmm
successful person, right? It's like we could read all the books we want, but if we don't start applying them, then there's really no changes that are going to happen.
Another really important thing for me to always be a learner
Mhm.
because as an entrepreneur, you have to you have to learn on the job, and you cannot be someone that just kind of sticks to one way of doing things and not adjust as changes happen. That's ultimately how you survive. There's so many entrepreneurs that fail because they don't have that ability. And for me, one of the key things that I like to do is hear different perspectives, and I do that by reading.
Mm.
So when I go to the gym, I have an Audible subscription, and I do as it's combining tasks. So I'm working out, but I'm also listening to, like, in the beginning of my workout, I listen to nonfiction. And then towards the end of the workout where I'm doing cardio, I'm listening to fiction, right? So like a novel or something of that nature where I don't have to be as concentrated or taking notes within the Audible platform. So these kind of things have really helped me evolve as a creative and as an entrepreneur.
So you can take notes in the Audible platform?
Yeah, yeah, you
I
can.
didn't even know that. That's cool. Is that a new feature?
I mean, since I've had it, it's been there, but you could always just kind of click stop and add note, and you add note. Even yeah, I typically review the notes. If it's something that I make a note of for my business, I go back and I try to have time, which I always don't do that well, but try to have time for the business where I'm thinking of processes and not just doing the day-to-day sales calls and emails, but really having a creative period for the business too, because
Mhm.
that's how you grow.
Yes, it's those differences of being, are you an operator? Are you a manager? Are you actually a CEO? So it's good that you're
Exactly.
mindful of that. So talk to me about design in DC. What is the value? What is your unique niche that you offer clients, and what are the types of clients you work with, and who are the best clients for your organization?
Yeah, Design in DC, we are a digital agency. I like to say we're a digital agency built for the future. We create end-to-end digital experiences, websites, web development, mobile apps, web apps, and also digital marketing, right? We really like to look at ourselves as consultants. I can't
Okay.
tell you how many horror stories that I've seen of people that, just have someone build their website and don't give them the proper training on how to build on top of it, or to then use that as a lead funnel to grow their business and have more potential leads. For us, it's really about that consulting and looking at our clients as creative partners. I actually often in my sales pitch on our calls, I bring in what I've done in the film world. And the other co-founder and I, we started this agency. He came out of the web design kind of digital agency world, and I came out of the film world initially when we first started this company. And what made it unique was we combined these two forces. One, my creative ability. We brought in, an in-house animation team, and all of our websites really have a lot of micro animations, pushing the user to engage in the story of the brand.
Mhm.
And from there, we see better results in terms of conversions. And we work with clients in multiple different industries, from government IT being in DC, a lot of government contracting companies, to the solar space, to the health field. So to consulting firms. That's why we don't really try to niche in one specific industry, but rather say that we can do any industry, because at the end of the day, we are problem solvers, and we are looking to find the problems of your business and help you better articulate who you are as a brand to your consumers, that will eventually allow for better conversions, no matter what those conversions are, and then ultimately allow your business to grow. So that's why we also offer marketing, because we want the website or whatever kind of digital platform we create to be the engine, and then marketing to be the fuel that then grows your business.
It's so important to communicate what a company is to their consumers and to have it understood on the end so that consumers can take advantage of the company, because companies can really make a positive difference in people's lives. That sounds very valuable.
Thank you.
So, how do you view the role of storytelling in creating social change? And can you share an example of a time a story you told made a significant impact?
Great question. That's story in terms of social changes. a lot of what my philosophy is. I studied a lot of different film movements about how story can lead to political change in a given country. I studied under uh, Haile Gerima, underground black filmmaker. He's originally from Ethiopia, and he comes out of the third cinema movement and this idea that if you do tell your story, that is by definition a political act, right? So telling your story truthfully, no matter what it is something that will ultimately be a form of defiance against the powers that be, against the power structure. So with Professor Garima, we always learned to be in control of our story and not let, as he called the men in suits, to come and steal your story and make it solely a commodity to then be sold on the market. Rather, you could still have a film that is a commodity, but that is true to your story of what you want to tell, true to your people, true to your to the characters that you're trying to introduce to the world. So all these things are, to me, are really important. So it ultimately comes down to having conviction and being truthful with your experiences, and not trying to create some kind of caricatured stereotype of who your people are, but rather the essence of who you are. And sometimes he even talks about, it's just as simple as, listening to your mother talk about sitting in front of a fire. Like, he has these workshops where we sit in front of a fire and we talk about the experiences of our ancestors. And these kind of experiences really allow you to see the essence of storytelling. And if I were to say, in mainstream media and Hollywood, all the cinema that we see, the vast majority is not truthful.
Mm.
So you have to go to the world. I mean, you do find some big budget films that sometimes are truthful, but even I think of a story like Get Out, right? To me, it was such a truthful story. But ever since then, the stories have become a little bit more caricatured and more Hollywood templatized, if you will. So even he talks about, we don't have to stick to the three-act structure. We can break that mold by going five-act structure. You even think of some of these really long films, that these Italian neorealist films. They don't stick to that structure necessarily. So from my standpoint, you need to be in control of your own story. Ultimately, is the point.
And I'm sure you could apply that to both with your filmmaking and with working with brands,
Hmm.
and selling, whether it's services or products, because even CEOs who start a company, usually there's a deeper purpose and a story behind that as well. Have you found that to be true when you're working with companies?
Yes, absolutely. For me, I started this company by having a good sales strategy too, and being able to talk to clients and ultimately just being human. I see so many on a daily basis emails come in trying to pitch me on different services. And ultimately, I really believe that, I was just even writing some email templates right now. It's important to be human in how you write and not overly gimmicky and respectful to the people that you're selling those services to, then ultimately pushing the client to have that truth of their own business come out in their storytelling. And, we often find that it doesn't mean you have to be transparent and naked in everything that you put out to the world, but rather truth is really important in how you present yourself to the world. Because if the clients don't feel like they're being cheated, no matter what it is, or it could be an NGO, it could be anything, then ultimately they'll be more likely to work with you. That's why we always prioritize long-term partnerships rather than making a quick buck. And we do offer easy options for the client to get out of a contract, because ultimately, if they don't want to work with us and it's not a good relationship, that's fine. We want long-lasting relationships, and we want to grow with you as your business grows.
Great. So going back to your film experience. So
Mm.
Renaissance Man earned the Best Documentary Film Award. Can you walk us through the journey of making that film and what you think resonated most with the audiences?
Yeah, thank you. That was a film that I created for my master's thesis at
Mhm.
Howard University, and it followed a character called Tendani, who his father came from East Africa, and he grew up in DC, but he didn't really have a father around him. And I was always interested in kind of exploring that. A lot of my other films did that as well, exploring the father-son relationship and, when a father is not present, the anger that can come up there and what the son may turn to in terms of trying to kind of adopt this hyper masculine mold and often using creativity as an outlet. So Tandani has really become a pillar of the community in DC by creating these art projects and in Ward 8 and all these different ways for young African Americans that come from a lower socioeconomic class to be able to propel themselves by using art, for example, to monetize their situation, even people with no college degrees. So, yeah, I got to see that firsthand, and I thought it was a really impactful story. Some of the graffiti art that he did, at a time when DC was being gentrified all over the place. He did some of those initial murals where the Capitol Stadium is now, the national, the baseball team. So I was really struck by that. And I think the audience wanted to hear stories that were real. And I think people that knew someone that didn't have a father, I knew someone that grew up in that environment and found a positive way to overcome those obstacles through the arts was really, I think, what resonated with the audience.
Beautiful. Well, that is inspiring. So your films, The Stripe in Her Eye and El Mahal, are set to come out soon. So what can viewers expect from these new releases, and what was the experience of creating them?
Well, I should say that Al Mahal was already released and
Okay.
it did win a few awards.
Well,
Um,
congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, that. So Al Mahal was my first film. It was a narrative short about my dad's experience coming from Ramallah, Palestine to Houston, Texas in the late 1970s. And I fictionalized that story. It's also very much about the father-son relationship and a son that is longing for his father to return. Is kind of trapped in this store, working, still longing to return to his native Palestine. So it won film festival in Italy, the Wheaton Film Festival in DC, among others in LA. So, no, definitely smaller film festivals, but nonetheless, it was my first feature short, and I got to tour it around. As it relates to The Stripe in Her Eye, it initially started as a film called Return to Ramallah, which may be known to some people on the internet that way. And it was a Kickstarter campaign. And the whole idea was to just get my father to go back to his homeland and to film his journey. That was really the idea. I brought my sister Nadine, who did the sound, and my other sister Shidian, who was a lawyer at the time. And so it really kind of turned into this family experience of going back. And as I watched the footage, it really evolved that we had a lot of footage of Nadine. And so I was able to tell the story through Nadine's eyes, and
Mm.
Nadine kind of narrates it. And again, it's really centered around memory, diaspora. At the time, we were caught in the middle of the Israelis bombing us in the middle of the night, and I got footage of that and just what it means to be an American coming to Palestine and then being able to have that privilege to leave, and then also how music, where we all play music together. We have a family band, and how that was used as a way for us to hold on to the memories in America and ultimately connect with people within Palestine. We have applied to Sundance. among other festivals, and the film about 10 years in the making. I, for many, many years, thought about just releasing it into a smaller film festival and seeing how it goes, but I always had big dreams for it. And I look at it much as my baby, and surrounded an all-star team around that film, and finally starting to pay dividends. And I'm hopeful that it'll be in theaters soon, and be on the festival circuit.
And that was my next question. How do we access all these wonderful films you're making? I would like to watch some of them. Where can we find them?
Yes, so I have a bunch of them on Vimeo, but I do need to do a better job of releasing them to the world. So there is one that is there for the world to see right now, which is Normalized. And Normalized is a film that was made about an African American man, and CJ also who was dealing with bipolar disorder. And really, it's an intimate look at the complexities of manhood and childhood trauma, and how mental instability can lead to detrimental decisions. It's based on a real story that can either kill you or make a cautionary tale of you while seeking to discover the answer to the question, what does it mean to be normal? Right. And so we teamed up with CJ in that one at the DC Independent Film Festival. If you would like to watch the film, you can watch it at normalizedthemovie.com. That's normalized, Normalized, themovie.com.
Great. So do these films ultimately inspire people, warn people? Are they different endings? What is your end goal with these? I mean, I know telling a raw, true, honest story.
Mm-hmm.
Anything at the end that you're really hoping to create beyond that or not?
Yes, no, good question. I mean, for me, as I mentioned in the beginning, I became a filmmaker because I believed that it was almost like a better uh, type of politician, and that I could change people's hearts and minds quicker through a film. I mean, I think back to just the environmental movement, and how many friends and family that I remember that watched these documentaries that ultimately started to affect policy change,
Mm.
in terms of how we're polluting the environment. I think of films related to health, documentaries, and ultimately, I don't think it's one film can make an incredible change, but I think it's the accumulation of multiple films, and that ultimately can change representation. I've written a lot about the stereotypes of Arabs and Hollywood cinema, and how, if you look back even to the early 1900s, silent cinema, the stereotypes of the Arab were there as this kind of lecherous, desert dwelling villain. And then as we got Palestinian Americans, Arab Americans telling their own story, they were able to combat these stereotypes and ultimately slowly start to change these harmful stereotypes. So that is definitely one way. But on a more basic level, art, I believe, should impact you emotionally. And I think that film has the ability to impact people emotionally that they may not even know. It may be being done on an unconscious level, in the same way that these big Hollywood films are impacting them to kind of go in one direction on an emotional level. You can create a spark that ultimately moves them in a way to think twice about a given situation, or about a person's life, or about how they interact with people within their community. Because ultimately, big political problems are made up of small, different personal decisions, and that accumulates, create power dynamics that ultimately impact the world on a large scale.
So you mentioned that it's accumulation of these films. So what advice do you have to emerging filmmakers who are passionate about social issues and may feel limited by industry expectations or financial constraints?
Great question. I think the best advice that I have for all filmmakers, all artists, all creatives is do not feel like you have to watch or read a playbook on how you make your art. You should try to make your art unadulterated by the rules, all while learning the tricks and trades of the industry, understanding ways that you can obviously put food on the table. But ultimately, it is about telling your story in the most truthful manner possible and making mistakes. I really think that making mistakes in today's day is very shied upon. I mean, especially with the robots, the algorithms taking over everything. There's this sort of perfection with things like Chat GPT. And sometimes I even look for an email I could find a spelling mistake and like just something to allow me to know that there is a human behind this email. So it's ultimately, in my opinion, you need to make mistakes to learn. You need to put yourself in situations that are uncomfortable and don't think that everything is going to happen at once. And this really goes for any career. It is the slow, cumulative burn of your hard work and the boring work that ultimately creates small victories. And small victories add up to create very large change and very big victories. So I really stress upon the new generation to look for those small wins and then see those small wins building up rather than thinking that everything is going to happen at once or thinking that you're going to hit the jackpot. It's slow and it's boring, but ultimately the results are really rewarding if you're consistent.
So, where have you learned this perspective to embrace mistakes and to be more human? You know, as a life mastery consultant and dream builder coach, in addition to recruitment, that's a big part of what I teach when I'm teaching the methodologies for people to have a more empowered mindset, right? To really
Mm-hmm.
embrace failure, to see it as feedback. But that's not in the common thinking. So, where did you learn it?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm glad you teach that. I've learned it. I can't say I learned it in one place. I learned it from all the books that I've read. You know, a lot of the books that I've read, whether it's about mindfulness, therapy, I am one that has been doing therapy for 3 to 4 years. At first, I didn't believe in it, but it really allowed me to kind of get out of that hyper masculine mold and be more in touch with my emotions. Also, read the book The Power of Now, which was really impactful for me to understand how living in the moment and living in the moment is about making mistakes ultimately. Like if you're truly and completely in the moment, then you will do everything decisively with a veracity that that you can't do if you're thinking about the past or thinking about the future. So that's kind of what impacted my philosophy on that. Also, teachers, I came up through a very old school way of thinking with my professors from Howard to Trinity College in Ireland. There was never a plan given to me that was easy. It was always through hard, boring work. Sitting in the library, if you don't know something, reading it over, and whether it's learning a theory or learning a camera, like ultimately there's a level of some boring work that goes into it, and learning to love that process to
Mhm.
me is ultimately what allows you to have those small victories, and then also knowing to be appreciative to yourself and not too hard on yourself when you do make those small victories. Like maybe you wanted your company to reach a certain revenue goal and you didn't reach it, but you had these small victories of growth that could potentially bode well for the future. So I'm a big fan of being appreciative to yourself, but not being unrealistic, whether it's unrealistic and the lofty goals or unrealistic and I'm so bad and I did so poorly, right? There's always that middle ground.
And you mentioned recognizing the wins.
Hmm.
And I think that if you get in the habit of seeing the wins, you'll end up seeing more wins, which is what I'm hearing
Right.
you say.
Yes, absolutely. From my standpoint, I don't think there's anything good about being overly negative, right? But you can be overly positive to the point that you are unrealistic, right? Hey, we're gonna hit, and then that ultimately can derail you as an entrepreneur as well. So, in my opinion, you have to find this middle ground where, again, you could see wins on an hourly basis, and you could see wins on a daily basis, monthly, quarterly, and I think it's by having good data, good note taking, seeing where you're going, planning where you're going, not right into the wind, no plan, but also having that ability to have that freedom to create, right, without the restrictions of a plan. So I always tell my students this, having a plan with your film, with the intention of breaking it. You could have a perfect shot list going to on set. You're going to start with the wide, and then you go to the close up, and then everything changes because there's a lightning storm or something. You need to ultimately have that plan and know what to break out of that plan in order to get film that still works. So you plan, but you also plan for mistakes to happen and know how to adjust to that plan.
So, for many entrepreneurs, living the dream means constantly evolving. So, what's your dream for Design in DC's next chapter, and how do you see the company's role in shaping the industry in the coming years?
Yes, for design in DC, we want to constantly become a disruptor in the industry. I'm a true believer that to be disruptive in your given market ultimately helps you with conversions, as I mentioned previously, and not creating the same website or the same digital product that is the same website for that industry, but rather creating something that stands out and really relates to the target market. So for me, it's about creating a digital agency that's built for the future, that is able to use automation, that is able to use the new tools that have been given to us in today's day and age, all while still being a creative partner, still being human, and using those tools to our advantage rather than letting the tools use us, right? So
Mhm.
in the day, AI, automation, all of that is a tool. If you don't create a system around how to use those tools, the tools will ultimately use you.
Interesting perspective. Anything else you'd love to tell our audience, especially those who want to go for their dreams?
Yeah, I really appreciate this platform that you're encouraging creatives to get out and to kind of live their dreams. To me, I know this is kind of cliche, but don't let anyone break like even the most crazy dream that you may have, and never lose sight of what that ultimate goal is, even if it feels irrational. So for me, I wanted to see my film in a theater on the highest stage possible. And I just always stuck to that. And I almost, in a way, irrationally believed that, even when everything around me looked like it wouldn't come to fruition. So have that irrational belief that that you're going to achieve your goal.
Dream
That would be
big.
my advice.
I love it.
Yeah,
Dream big. Well, thank you for participating in my show, Ziad. And I'd love to have you on my show
sure.
again for us to hear more about your achievements in film and design in DC.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. And again, I really appreciate this platform and look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Yes, I do too. And thank you for joining my show, Empowering Creatives to Live Their Dreams. I'm Jessica Osrek. You can do it. I believe in you.